Former public protector, Professor Thuli Madonsela, says South Africa needs a revived, principled and epic leadership. She says that's the key to fixing the problems currently plaguing the country. Professor Madonsela was delivering the keynote address at a gathering of councillors and municipal officials in honor of Nelson Mandela, where she also spoke out against leaders encouraging people to invade unoccupied land. Well, she joins me now. Good evening, Prof. Thank you very much for coming through. Quite a speech you made at that gathering, which moved. I remember saying this one mayor really pouring her heart out about the challenges that they are facing as public representatives who are at the coalface of service delivery and the demands that South Africans are making on the government. Overall, what was your sense of how they are feeling and how they are dealing with the challenges they're faced with?
Thank you for the privilege, Vuyo, and good evening to the viewers. I got a sense that we had a group of people who want to make a difference, who are committed to leading properly. I think a lot of them had just gone through this training by Wits University in cooperation with SALGA. However, they felt that some of the problems they are faced with are structural, and that much as they want to make a difference, they are going to be hamstrung by these problems, such as people being appointed by seniors in the political party who have no skills and who don't have the right values, and difficulties in firing people who are not performing, and also difficulties in getting their colleagues sometimes to cooperate when it comes to consulting properly with the proper public, as opposed to handpicking a few people and consulting with those and then saying people are agreeing when people in the broader community have been excluded.
Now, you urge them to basically trudge on, to follow, the example of Nelson Mandela, around whom, of course, the whole theme of the day was. You spoke about integrity, you spoke about being principle-driven, purpose-driven, and not follow the path of, as you put it, the path of reckless drivers who may be on the same road as them.
Well, certainly the idea, the model of leadership I proposed to them was a model of leadership that I believe Nelson Mandela was exemplary in being ethical in everything that he did, which was principle-driven, regardless of the circumstances, purpose-driven, and he always considered, what are we trying to achieve? What society are we trying to build? He was also conscious of his own decisions, the impact that those decisions could make. So he wouldn't just say to people, do this, but privately he asked them to do wrong things, because he knew that that would have an impact on the broader society he wanted to create, where there was clean governance and there was growth for everyone. And also I implored them to continue to be service-oriented, because epic leadership is really about ethics, purpose, impact consciousness, and committed to serve.
Of course, you also warned them that it's not going to be an easy road. There's a price to pay if you do what we are urging them to do.
Well, I did. Well, one of the mayors confirmed that, the lady who poured her heart out, that people have been, asked to hound her, and she had to run off to her own office. You know yourself that you had to lose your job in SABC, and I'm sorry to say that it's not a funny thing for you, but I was saying to people, please, rather pay now, instead of paying later. Pay now means you might lose your job, you might lose some friends, you might be unpopular, but the price is better if you pay now. If you pay later, there's two ways you could pay. One is you could lose your job, lose your house, and lose everything, because you would have complied with an invitation to participate in things that lack integrity, such as corruption and vote buying and just all those wrong things. But the other way of paying later is finding yourself being not in integrity with your own soul, where you start hating yourself and people see you drinking a lot, buying a lot of expensive cars with people's money. That's because there's now dissonance between your soul and the things you do.
Well, I'm tempted to ask what you would have done if you were still public protector and you were hearing the stories of VBS, for example.
It's a sad story. I think my response would be, firstly, as a human being, how do you steal from the poor just to buy those luxury goods? But if I talk about people who are divorced from their own soul, you can understand that. It would have been a matter that requires investigation. However, as we all know, the public protector doesn't have all of the resources. He or she at any given stage might want to investigate, but there's a whole lot of other things that have not yet been investigated. SASSA, for example, there's a lot of things that started being investigated during my time about looting of people's monies. That's still yet to be dealt with. So before you go to VBS, you would have to deal with those. But I honestly think that the president may want to consider a special investigation unit beyond the current SIU that just looks into cleaning up corruption allegations parallel to the State Capture Commission.
Well, talk to us a little about whatever it is that you came across with regard to SASSA in the time that you were still public protector.
Well, there were lots of allegations, and we had whistleblowers from inside with proper documents. A lot of it had to do with they had projects that they were doing that were just random projects, and Imbizo projects where they would rent marquees for 1 million rand, a marquee that you could buy 1 million of them with 1 million rand. Chairs and all of these things that we now hear about. But there were also allegations regarding the minister whose daughter just allegedly received just one phone call threatening to kill the mother, not the daughter. And then SASSA money was then used to provide security for the daughter at exorbitant amounts. And then there was an intelligence service that was being provided to SASSA by the colleague who went to the State Security Agency and then is now working at correctional services. There were a lot of allegations involving him, his company, around them being involved in these security assessments, which we saw them. A lot of the security assessments, they didn't really pass muster, even us, when we saw them. And then they would then give people security and then lots of resources, but the companies that were also providing the resources were linked somehow to the companies that were doing the threat assessment. So it was lots and lots and lots of complaints around abuse of public resources.
Now, you didn't confine your criticism, of course, to things associated with the governing party. You also spoke out against leaders encouraging people to invade unoccupied land, saying that that was reckless and actually against the Constitution.
Certainly, members of Parliament swear to uphold the Constitution. They shouldn't make statements where they invite members of the public to violate the Constitution or to perform any illegality. So that's one thing, that these members of Parliament are violating the Constitution they sought to uphold. But the second thing is they're playing with fire, because if you're asking people to be unlawful, to invade people's properties, you're asking them to be criminals. You're inculcating a spirit of criminality. So these people would be criminals in other ways as well, beyond the criminality you're inviting them to do. But others too, protecting themselves, might also resort to criminality. So basically, you are inviting the nation to violate the rule of law. And when things blow up, as you were talking about things in the news as we were listening here, I start asking whether some of it does not have to do with the reckless statements some of our leaders keep making.
Do you get a sense that perhaps leaders who are in the opposition, because the EFF, for example, that has asked people to invade land, that they feel they have less of a responsibility than, say, a governing party?
suspect they might feel that, but the truth is, I spoke about the poem about dying from the cold within. They are wrong about that, but there is also a Sepedi saying that says, don't relieve yourself upstream because you might want to drink the water later downstream.